Accommodation Show. I am joined by Tim Speicher from Buoy, who is going to be talking to us about revenue management, all things numbers, how to improve your revenue for your property, why revenue management is important, what it's all about. We're going to be covering topics from the very basic to the very advanced. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Amazing. Look, we were just talking for a little bit. You're giving me a bit of an intro. I would love you to introduce yourself to the audience because your story is really fascinating. What you've been through and why you created this startup called Buoy. The story is quite synergistic for you. So, introduce yourself. Let us know a bit of your story, who you are, where you're from, what Buoy is all about, and your history in the industry.
Yeah. So my story with accommodations really begins back in 2013 when I became an Airbnb host for the first time. That got me into the vacation rental industry, just like renting out one little place in a Chicago basement. And I grew that into a small portfolio and then joined Oasis when they came into town back in 2016 and grew with their team until Hyatt invested in 2017, where I got a formal revenue management training, went through their program at Cornell. And I came back with an algorithm like ready to implement at Oasis, like through their global portfolio. But then by that point, they were selling to Vacasa, so I never really got a chance to see it in practice. So I went off on my own as an independent revenue manager, using this methodology, which I called Buoy because it's about floating on market currents and conditions. And it took me about 6 months of doing this independently to realize, this methodology has to be a true algorithm. I have to automate everything that I'm doing. I have no business reading a market. It needs to be done by a robot, every day and much more accurately. So, it took then another 18 months to 2 years to build this thing into an actual platform. My co-founder and wife designed an incredible dashboard, and then we got an engineer from Spotify. The last project that he did was building the Spotify podcasting database, and, Buoy is his next project. So we launched officially in May, and we're rolling out the platform now.
Amazing. Cool story. And I think it's really cool because, you started that journey with Airbnb, then you went into a much bigger company, and what you've done is you've niched yourself into into becoming an expert at a particular angle, which is the revenue side. And then you've kind of put dots together to create the technology to basically make things easier for everybody. Now, I would love to hear a little bit more about that time at Oasis and you doing the course at Cornell. What was that like? What was that all about? I'd love to understand kind of what it takes to get enough skill set and enough knowledge to really be able to make a difference to people's revenue.
Yeah, so at Oasis, I began just managing the Chicago portfolio. I had already done that, on my own. I had a portfolio of, I think, 7 listings at that time. But then I grew the Chicago portfolio out to 30 for Oasis and then took on Austin and Miami. And during that process, I was meeting with all of these owners, meeting with landlords and that kind of thing. And just really learning why guests were booking, learning how to do the operation, learning how to do the advertisement, run your own OTA parallel to the other big OTAs. And, we were able to solve a whole bunch of operational problems. But the thing that I really specialized in was revenue management. I had an approach that was derived from my time in event pricing. And so I could sort of manipulate that approach a little bit. But then that got formalized when Hyatt came in and invested because they were like, hey, we're going to overhaul the company. We're going to touch you guys up in all of these places. They sent me through their Cornell course. I got the traditional hospitality revenue management education, realized that 90% of it did not apply to emerging vacation rentals. So I adapted my own thing and tried to implement that at Oasis.
Okay, so yeah, fascinating. I love it. One of the things I picked up from that was you talked about event pricing. What were you doing there, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so I started, like so many hospitality people, I started in a different industry. Initially, I was going to be an artist, and I was working in the theater industry, and then that took me into theater marketing. And I just got and I realized there's so much you can do to improve your revenue just by adjusting a price. It's it's not that hard to do, like to just make the price $24 instead of $18. But, being able to tell what the market is going to bear, like that's the, the difficult thing. But I was always impressed that like the action of raising the price doesn't take long at all compared to the like huge return that you can get when you get it right. And so when I opened up my own listings, I was like, well, hey, this is a calendar. I'm selling I'm selling a different kind of product, but it's still like a room night, which is kind of like a ticket. And so I was like, I know that I want to be aggressive far in advance, and that like as the window closes, like I'm going to, sell some last minute tickets, which are kind of like discounted nights. And so it's like, you can see how that's like a really basic sort of revenue management algorithm that, most hosts are going to instinctively try to implement.
Let me run the challenge to you. With events, though, generally it's the other way around, isn't it? So with airlines, I think that the pricing would be quite similar. Actually, with airlines, it's the other way around. If you book ahead of time, then you get a much better deal. But then as you get closer to the actual event, then they generally put the prices up. Am I missing something?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things going on there. Number one, if we had a really hot show, then yes, the ticket prices are going to go up at the last minute. But it's rare that at the last minute you would be shopping for a plane ticket, and you would have like 40 different like really different plane options for you. But in the event industry, you can do like a whole bunch of different things. And you also know that in general, people buy those tickets like further out in advance. And so, if you have unsold inventory at the last minute, then you're happy to throw it on Hotix or like some sort of other like discounting ticket website to get yourself extra exposure, to bring in like a cohort of audience who like only buys those tickets, or like people who like only see that as an advertising platform, So but when I'm trying to figure out like what is the rate range where people will actually purchase this ticket, then there's generally a decline as I begin aggressive and then I get less aggressive. It is on its own like not good. It's like it's not enough on its own. You have to factor in a whole bunch of different things. Just like the algorithm is much more sophisticated now. It still does like start really high because a lot of the like biggest ADRs that you're going to see are with a really big booking window, because somebody like needs to be in that place at that time and they're going to guarantee it like way in advance. But then like the real magic is in like that last part of the booking window, in which case like we're comparing like our competitive cohort, our hotels, and then also historical behavior, where like if we're outpacing previous years, then you want to be higher. If you're underpacing previous years, then you want to be lower.
On that, I'm curious. This is a question that I've had for a while. So obviously we can look at historical data. We can look at what's happening in the market at the moment, so what the competitors are doing. What about stock? So the amount of available room nights out there. Is anyone looking at that kind of data and putting it into the equation?
Yeah, so I know that all of the base rate algorithms have some sort of a function around occupancy. There's a couple of tricks with that. It's like, number one, nobody's booking the Super Bowl right now, so the neighborhood occupancy is low. But we know it's going to be a high event. You know what I mean? Like lots of people are going to book once they know who's in the Super Bowl. So like if I'm going to like put a huge part of my algorithm on occupancy, I'm pretty nervous about that. And then also like you never really see that with hotels. It's like you never know like what the actual occupancy is at a hotel, because they do so much, making rooms available and then like taking them down. And so it's like that's just one way they manipulate the perception of scarcity. And then it's becoming more difficult to get that for vacation rentals. So I want to be like a little bit ahead. If I know that the occupancy is rising, it's because a certain number of people have seen that there's a good deal and they're buying. I want to make sure that my rate is right before that point, rather than in response to behavior.
Within our audience, we have people that are running an Airbnb or just a single property. They might have a bed and breakfast where they've got 2 to 4 to 5 rooms. Then you've got motels that might have 20 rooms to 40 rooms. And then we can start to get into the hotel space. So we have a really big cross-section of people listening to these podcasts and to us. In terms of revenue management, are there rules that you can apply across the board to everybody, and things that people that could pick up from you today that you've kind of learned along the way that you could share with everyone that would apply to them no matter which kind of segment it is? Is there anything that you could impart?
Man, do I have universal knowledge that is applicable across every vertical? I don't know. I would say like the one thing that I want to encourage everybody to do is just like ingest way more data and like automate way more of your data ingestion. You know, I've been really surprised seeing some really sophisticated companies that have like really well-established revenue management teams, and they don't have like a daily feed update of like the rates at their competitors. And like that for me is like such a basic thing. And now that data is so abundant, I feel like there's no excuse for having like a absolute daily update of everyone that your guest is going to choose between when they don't choose you. Like, you want to know what all of them are doing, because that just makes it so much easier to sort of read the market. So I say like everybody should get really, really, really good at creating comp sets and, you know, cohorts that are specifically relevant to them, and then focus a ton of your time on that data and like ingest a ton of that. And, you know, don't focus as much on everything else.
This is a really great segue. So I actually have a client right now who keeps on putting up her pricing. She's like, yeah, I put it up. People are still booking. But she doesn't know where the threshold is. She doesn't really know what that price is actually meant to be, and maybe not really understanding how to look at that comp set. What would your advice, apart from obviously buying your software, which is of course one of the pieces of the puzzle, but what if we talk about the other piece? Like, what if you said there's lots of data and they're sitting there right now listening to this guy, well, where is this data? How do I get access to it? What do I need to be looking at once I do get the data? So let's talk about just a small operator to start off with, and maybe we'll go from there.
Yeah, so first of all, let me say that the small operators, I think, have a RevPAR advantage over every other operator. Like the highest dollar values that I see in terms of earnings come from individuals who are crazy dedicated to like 5 listings. You know what I mean? I think of John On in Honolulu. That dude absolutely kills it, and he's got a relatively small portfolio that he just manages the hell out of. So I say like those people, they're not always like the most sophisticated, like on the technology side, but they are so good at making the product great, at like paying attention to their listings, paying attention to their guests, that like even just that is like kind of enough a lot of the time. But I would say that like the key is in finding the right demand predictors. And when I say demand predictors, I mean like tracking the rates that actual hotel revenue managers have set, or professional revenue managers who are relevant to you. And so what I do is we use Hotel Compete, company in Chicago. Everybody can contact them and get hotel data on like pretty much any hotel in the world. And, you know, we'll create a special comp set with them. And then I have 50 different revenue managers who are predicting demand for my specific area. And there was some research that came out earlier this year testing a diverse set of trained problem solvers versus the renowned expert problem solvers. And in all of the tests, the diverse group beat the individuals. It's just like, it makes sense. Like 50 experts are going to get it right more often than 1 or 2 experts. And so I'm like, well, if that's true, then I'm just going to tie my demand prediction to that. And so I say like, everybody get that feed, come in, take a look at where everybody's priced in terms of like your cohort of relevant experts. And then it makes it really easy to then like express your own instincts. Like, for example, I was just looking at Washington, D.C. today, which is a market that's like flipped upside down based on historicals, because it was crazy closed throughout cherry blossom season, which is like the most usually the biggest month of the year, and then like slowly reopened over the summer, and like all of these events that were happening pre-summer got like moved into the fall, and like all of these conferences and things like, and so it's like normally, you know, you have a ramp up in October, or sorry, not in October, in April, but this year we're seeing it like really ramping up in September, going into October, and then coming down through November. And the demand prediction looks nothing like the initial draft that I've seen on a lot of people's rate schedule. It's like they're having a hard time accounting for those itinerant events. Like Judas Priest has a concert that was like rescheduled a couple of different times. There's a AUSA conference, like the Armed Services Conference and stuff like that. All of these things are happening at weird times and like throwing demand all out of whack. And I'm like, am I going to be able to read that market well enough and like track all of the events and say, okay, this event should be priced similar to this old event from the past? It's like, no. I ignore all of the rates from historical data. I instead only look at guest behavior. So like this is when people tend to book stays over these dates. And then, we're using the rate from current market conditions, especially looking at what that group of experts is doing. And then I'm deciding if I want to raise or lower my rate based on how people have behaved in the past. So if I know that like people haven't really started booking, then like I do keep my rate relatively aggressive, like relative to my competitors. And then, as the booking window closes and like the booking pace really increases, then like, we adjust a little bit more based on, a couple of factors.
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying as well is that in terms of finding the right price, you start off quite high with forward bookings and then reduce the price as you're getting closer in time. And based on that, you can make some really good assumptions as to, hey, hold on a second. I'm charging double the price I normally would, and you have very little to lose by kind of testing with heavily with those forward bookings. Is that about right?
Yeah, because think about all of the stays that would happen like on Christmas. It's like a whole bunch of thousands of stays, and every one of those stays is going to have a purchase date. And so if you think about all of those purchase dates like graphed out on a timeline, you'll be able to observe that like the stays are like really low volume, like 2 years in advance. And then as time closes, there's a ramp up and a ramp up and a ramp up. And then depending on the date, like there may be a ramp down at the end, or it may just like keep ramping up all the way to the actual date. And so I say, all right, I'm going to look at all of those purchase dates, and then I'm going to divide those into quartiles based on volume. And then I'm going to adjust my rate high in the first quartile. I'm going to make it competitive with my cohort in the second two quartiles, which I refer to as the prime booking window. And in that final crucial quartile, I take it higher if pacing is outpacing previous years, and lower if it's under previous years. And then like based on all of that, it makes it pretty easy for the manager to then go in and say, you know what, I'm going to get more aggressive on this date. Like we're right next to the ballpark, so the World Series is going to be big for us, like or whatever it is. So it's not that like historicals have like nothing to add anymore. It's that like the rates and the earnings on that night like have way less of a one-to-one comparison to this year than they would have in past years. And people like we're just ignoring 2020 anyway. So like, you're like looking at 2019 historicals, like you're going to run into trouble because we're in a completely different world than we were in back then. So
when we're looking back at historical data, we're looking at our own data from how we did the previous year before. We might look 2 years or 3 years in the past. We'll look at our competitors' data as well, like for the historicals and ones that are comparable. Is there anything else that we're looking for in terms of the past, or is that kind of is that it? I
mean, for me, it's the purchase dates are the most important thing as far as like predicting demand and changing the rate. But I track reservations all the way down to the very date, like for benchmarking against our cohort. Because it's one thing to see somebody like set their rate at $800, but like it's a really different thing to know if they actually got booked at that rate or not. So in my reporting, I use a running 7-day RevPAR average because it has a really close relationship to like your ADR, because like your ADR for a single night, like that is your RevPAR like for that night. And so if you take your ADR for your reservations in the past and you compare that against a running 7-day RevPAR average for different cohorts, then that's a way to collapse occupancy and ADR into a single metric, but then measure just your performance versus that. So I actually do this all visually. because I feel like reading graphs of, occupancy, ADR, like all of these different things, just like reading a spreadsheet, I get overwhelmed. And it's like trying to look at a weather map and look at rainfall, look at temperature, look at wind speed and all of that stuff and try to determine if a storm came through. I'd much rather just like look at a visualization and like be able to see the green blob like move over my city. So in all of the reporting that I do, I make it really visual because it makes people like process it so much more quickly.
Beautiful. I love it, and I think that's the best way forward is having all those graphs so that you can actually understand what you've got going on. And I can imagine that you as a business owner, you will keep updating all of that data so that it's more relevant and so that people can really visualize and understand what they're doing. As you also see what works and what doesn't. In terms of, I think towards sort of wrapping this up, because I think we've already landed a lot of nuggets for everybody and things that they should look at and have a think about. Tell me about the real impact of getting revenue management correct and what difference it can make for businesses and why they should have a look at it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to make you money. It's going to save you time. Like that's the basic thing. But I actually feel like that's not the heart of why we need revenue management and like the heart of like why it's so critical to get right at your company. And like that's peace of mind. You can never fret enough to understand your market. Like you just can't do it. People are going to try. People listening to this right now are currently fretting about their markets. And you don't need to. Like you can get the data. You can present it in a way that's easy to understand. And you can make informed adjustments like based on that data. I think that what we need to do is outsource everything that, like all of the number crunching, all of that stuff, like give it to a robot. Have them present something to you like packaged really, really well, or, give it to a talented revenue manager. They'll do it too. They'll just make more mistakes and take longer. And then take a look and say, okay, I feel like I understand where my market is. I've gone in and manipulated my rates. So I have expressed my creativity and my intuition over this rate set. And now I feel like I have a sense of understanding of my business, my performance, and my position relative to everybody else. And like being able to say, okay, the numbers are handled. Now I'm going to go communicate empathetically with the guest. Or like, now I'm going to go design a new place. Or like, now I'm going to figure out how to take the airplane hangar that's at my new property and turn it into an event space. Like that type of stuff, like that's where the huge difference is going to be made in your business. Like that's like the 2x, 3x changes that you're going to see. And that's the stuff that can't be automated. A robot will never communicate with your guests empathetically like you can. And you will never crunch numbers like a robot does. So find a robot that you trust, let them handle all of the numbers, and then go talk to those guests and do that really well.
Amazing. I don't have any more questions for today, and I think I'd love to have you back at some stage with kind of updates as to how you're going and what the business is doing and
Sure.
what improvements are being made. Are there any final thoughts that you have for today?
If I can plug just a little bit.
Sure, absolutely.
Just a little bit. I'm going to be on a couple of panels at the Data and Revenue Management Conference in Charleston later in August. We'll be doing one on comp set curation and one on pricing for Airbnb. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'll definitely be there. And then of course I've got the Clubhouse room every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific, where I answer specific questions about people's revenue management, their pricing, their minimum stays, all of that stuff.
Yeah, great. And if people wanted to get onto Buoy and have a look at the product and have a play with it, what would their steps be?
Buoy.us. So right now we're only on Guesty. So if you're a Guesty user, then go to our website, enter in your API token, and you're good to go. Otherwise, if everybody could just send me an angry email saying, when are you going to be on a different platform, then that's usually really helpful, and lots of people are doing that.
Beautiful. All right, Tim, look, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I actually haven't seen the software myself, so it's something that you need to do a demo for me at some stage
absolutely.
So I can have a little play around and have a look at what you're up to and what you're doing. I appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge. It's people, you don't get paid to be here, but people get a huge benefit from it. So I really appreciate it myself, and the community does as well. we'll catch you around. We'll see you on the Facebook group. So everybody, it's Buoy.us, which is spelt
BUOY.US.
Beautiful. And even though it's a .us, if we are international, it will still apply to us and it will still work.
Yep. We've got users in Brazil, Mexico, Belgium, France. Yeah, got a lot of users.
All over the place. All right, beautiful. Thank you so much. Have a really good day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.